Oh my gosh. Hi guys, it's Aggie K, Wealth Therapist, trying a new angle. Happy November 1st. And welcome to this episode, to this live stream, not episode. And a client of mine brought this up today, and I thought it was a great piece of mindset work to work on that she had worked through, and it had resulted in almost an immediate external result for her, which is really, really cool. So I wanted to bring it up into your consciousness today. And it's definitely one that's come up for me. If you weren't born rich, it likely will have come up for you. So what is this block? Let's understand it a little bit. How cute is this like fall scenery right here? Also cute. I like this angle. So let's understand this block a little bit first. It is absolutely an identity shift type of block where I have to be born rich to be rich because you don't feel rich. Right? Because you don't feel like a rich person. You don't feel like a wealthy person. And this is a really good one to work on, a really good one to do mindset work on, because there's a bunch of things going on here. One is that you're not identifying with your wealthy self, right? So it's me versus, rich people are, I'm not a rich person. I don't identify with the rich person or the rich person within myself. Hey, Whitney. So that's one for sure. And if you didn't, this is especially for you, if you weren't born into a rich family or a wealthy family, I know it's definitely come up for me in the past. Like, it's so hard to get ahead. Right? The dialogue behind that is it's so hard to get ahead. I'll never get ahead. It's so much work. It's such hard work because I have to make up for this generational gap. And it could be forever. It could be that nobody in your family was ever rich, and nobody in your family was ever wealthy. And that was definitely the case for me. I don't think, there were like some family members that had been successful, but very moderately, and no one had been really wealthy that we knew of. So when that's part of your history, it really can become a dialogue of, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I have had to, fight tooth and nail for everything I got, which may be entirely true, and it probably is, right? However, if it's the block that's coming up around making more money right now, you know that it's a mindset block, right? You know that it's a mindset block because you're choosing to keep identifying with this separation, that you don't have a wealthy version of yourself, that you don't have a version of yourself that can make a lot of money. And you're focused on, I never got the beginning on the good foot, financially in my family life or in my ancestry. And so I have to, everything has to be so much harder for me. And part of that is true, right? Part of that is the reality is that you don't have a buffer that someone else might. However, focusing on that, as that was absolutely true for me, not having that leg up, that someone else might have financially can feel, if you're focused on that, can really be, you can get into poor me, right? Like, poor me, I'll never get ahead. It's too hard. It's not enough. And that whole dialogue just totally fucks with your, pardon my language, money mindset, right? It really screws with seeing yourself as someone who is abundant and powerful and has gifts and has the ability to call into their lives whatever they want. So first of all, what's going on there is resistance to feeling like a wealthy person, because there's obviously some resentment that you didn't get that leg up, and you need to work through that. that peace. Like, why does somebody have it easier? And it can be around wealthy people. It could be around people who have partners who are wealthy, or families who are wealthy, or, this is easier for them, or that's easier for them. And it's a comparison game, right? So you got to, first of all, address that piece of resentment that's like, I didn't get the leg up. You didn't, right? And there's a million examples of people who were born into wealthy families, and there's a million examples of people who went from rags to riches and built it themselves, right? Different journeys, and we have to make peace with what we came into the world with, so that we stop making an excuse for why we can't show up today with the gifts that we have, it's standing in the power and the truth of who we are and calling into our lives what it is that we want, right? So what else did I write down here? See my messy desk, guys. Yeah, so there's part of it is probably is that you're making it too hard, and I'm a master at this. Anyone else? Anyone else a master at making things too hard? As a default, it's not something I want to do. I don't want to make things harder for myself than they have to be. But it can be a default of making things hard because they were in the past, because they were for your family, because it can't be that easy, because you have some beliefs around things being able to be easy. Now, there's always a differentiation between, I think there's just some misconceptions about what easy and hard really means, especially in online entrepreneurship. If there's still work to do, things don't fall out of the sky. There's still ways you need to show up, and channels you need to open for things to come to you. However, if there's a belief and a tendency and a default to make things hard, sorry about that, someone was just calling in, and they got declined, baby, because you're more important to me than that phone call, this live stream is. So there's a piece around making things harder than they have to be. And there's also something about putting money on a pedestal. Like, if you got born with that silver spoon in your mouth and you were born rich, it's just so much easier for you. And like putting that on a pedestal, like that makes everything easy. It doesn't, it makes some things easier. It can make some things harder. There's also people who are born rich and then die poor. There's also all kinds of things happen to people. So it's just another kind of setup and resentment that can be messing with your mindset. And you want to take a look at, why do I choose to make things harder than they need to be? What's my history around making things harder than they need to be? What's my need to make things harder than they need to be? Why is my self-worth wrapped up in making things harder than they need to be? And there's just there can just be a lack of evidence for you that things can, that things don't have to be so hard to be successful, to make them happen, to just have a different way to walk through life, that things can be easier, take some time to develop, right? Like Whitney, who flew across the pond, to have lunch with her friends, stepping into that life where things can be easier and the things that you dream of can actually start happening. But I'm sure that's been a process for her too, as it will be for you. But start with those beliefs around, why do I believe that? What do I get out of? What is the payoff to me for things being so hard, right? Well, it means I get to be a certain way in my life. It means I get to play a certain role in a certain card and have certain, empathy or compassion versus a real connection. Maybe that's how I get my value versus just truly connecting. There could be a lot of things going on there to take a look at, in terms of feeling deserving, connected, and worthy of having things be easy, right? Because that's really what it's about. When you're saying like, you have to be born rich to get rich, you're saying, I don't really believe that things can be that easy for me. That they're so easy for someone else. And it's about ease, and it's about what's your hang up, or what's your attachment to having things be hard, right? And it's not a judgment, and I'm not being critical, because I am definitely a person who often sits back and is like, why did I make that so hard for myself? But it's good to examine and keep your eyeballs on that. Like, how could this be easier? How could this be more fluid? How could this, be less challenging? How could making this, extra 10K or 20K or whatever it is that you want to make this month be easy? And not in the out of space into your lap and you do nothing and just wait for it to come to you way, but in the sense of, how am I grinding myself mentally into a pulp about this, right? That is preventing you from really having the energy, the momentum, and the inspiration to call things in, okay? Right. So Whitney's saying, yeah, that was mine. Not that easy for me, and then need to work extra hard. Right. And then overcompensate because I don't actually trust on a deep, deep level that I can have, be, and, enjoy what it is that I want. What other points did I have here for you guys? Yeah. And there's just and it can be an identity to the tribe, to how you grew up, to how your family had to fight for money or fight for success or fight to make it, and a loyalty to that story, can come up. So that's definitely something to look at, because you start to separate yourself from those people when things start to come easy to you. And that can be a weird feeling, when other people, friends, people in your environment, are having to work really hard, and you start to not have to work so hard. It can be very strange, right? It can be very alienating. So it could be something your subconscious is avoiding doing. So you want to focus on what's going to be your version of being wealthy, and you want to take a look at what parts of me are still hanging on to this idea that I am poor, that I'm always going to be poor, that I'm never going to get ahead, that I'm never going to, get ahead of my credit card debt. I'm never going to get ahead in terms of the clients. I'm never going to get ahead in my savings. What part of me believes that that'll never happen, and why, right? Do some investigating in that department. Why is it so committed to that reality versus, I can always have more. I can always create more wealth. I can always bring in more money. And what's, and explore what resistance you might have to that. And then stop buying into these thoughts. Just start observing, resentful thoughts or thoughts around, I didn't start off this way, so I'm always working from behind and having to catch up and measure up. And there's a real enoughness question there, right? That I want you to tap on and write on and really deeply get into. And that is the kind of stuff we do in your work with me. So if you're interested in that, I will pop the links below. PTP 2.0 is going. It's a rolling course. You can join anytime. And join my PTP All-Stars, and or hop onto a one-on-one and start digging into this stuff and clearing the path for you to be one of those rich people that you desire to be. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you on the next live. IEK Wealth Therapist. Mwah!